The Invisible Man Appears, or Toumei Ningen Arawaru in the original Japanese, was released on September 25, 1949, making it one of the earliest science fiction films out of Japan, predating the first Godzilla film by a full 5 years. It was produced by Daiei, the studio that would later release the first color science fiction film, Warning from Space, in 1956, and would become famous for its Gamera and Zatoichi films of the 60s and early 70s. It runs for 82 minutes and is filmed in black and white in 1.33 to 1 film aspect ratio. This is the first Japanese film based on the classic character introduced in H.G. Wells' 1897 story, The Invisible Man. Universal Studios first adapted the story in the classic 1933 film starring Claude Rains as the title character. Hollywood churned out several more Invisible Man films featuring different spins on the character before the concept made its way to Japan. The Invisible Man Appears was written and directed by Nobuo Adachi, based on a story by prolific mystery writer Akimitsu Takagi. The film's special effects were supervised by none other than Eiji Tsuburaya, the godfather of the kaiju eiga genre. Tsuburaya had been forced out of Toho under pressure from the U.S. occupation, who took issue with his work on propaganda films during the war. Tsuburaya expressed interest in Daiei's Invisible Man film and agreed to join the production. Without Tsuburaya's involvement, it's unlikely the film would have ever been greenlit. Tsuburaya, of course, eventually returned to Toho, where in 1954, 2 months after the release of Godzilla, he took another crack at the Invisible Man concept in Motoyoshi Oda's film Invisible Man, also known as The Invisible Avenger. The film's plot covers a lot of ground during its sparse runtime of an hour and 20 minutes. It begins in the laboratory of Dr. Nakazato, with the elder scientist observing the rivalry between his two understudies, Drs. Seki and Kurokawa. The two men are rivals in science and romance. They have taken up an informal competition to see who will be the first to discover a serum to make objects invisible, and the grand prize is the hand of Nakazato's daughter, Machiko. Unbeknownst to either of them, their mentor has already secretly perfected a formula. Nakazato later demonstrates the formula for his business friend Kawabe, who surreptitiously notes where Nakazato keeps it hidden. Shortly after this encounter, Nakazato disappears, leaving behind a note explaining that he's preparing to test the formula on himself. Kurokawa goes searching for Nakazato and also disappears. Then, an invisible man storms into a jewelry store and attempts to steal the Tears of Amour, an extremely valuable diamond necklace which, incidentally, Kurokawa also has his eye on. What follows is a tense crime mystery, screenwriter Takagi's specialty, with strong noir influences, where secrets are revealed, villains are unmasked, and what began as a playful rivalry between fellow scientists tumbles inexorably toward tragedy. The film progresses at a brisk pace, deftly whisking the viewer from one scene to the next, never lingering too long at any one stop to feel like it's dragging, but never too fast to feel like it's rushed, with a few exceptions. The flashback scene portraying the birth of the Invisible Man seems to progress a lot more quickly than it should have, with the characters making awfully short work of monumentally consequential decisions. Towards the final act of the film, the editing is a little jumpy, to the point where you lose track of where certain characters are supposed to be in relation to each other. This is particularly the case for the Invisible Man himself, for obvious reasons. In the final minutes of the film, he survives 2 attempts on his life, one from a fireplace poker and the other by gunshot, before finally meeting his demise in a shootout with the police. In each instance, there's no indication he survived the previous attempts until he literally appears out of nowhere to continue his mischief. Adachi's direction is competent, making ample use of first-person perspective to show the progress of the Invisible Man throughout a scene, a cheap in-camera trick to save on special effects. The acting all around is decent, with Shosaku Sugiyama's slimeball Kawabe being the clear standout, stealing nearly every scene he's in. Daijiro Natsukawa gives a strong performance as Dr. Seki. One of the best acted scenes occurs between him and Chizuru Kitagawa's Machiko. Machiko carries on nonchalantly, while Seki fidgets and anxiously tries to deflect her attentions, because he knows the jealous Invisible Man is in the room with them. Dr. Nakazato is played by Ryunosuke Tsukigata, better known for playing Genosuke Higaki, the main rival of the title character in Akira Kurosawa's debut film, Sanshiro Sugata. Unfortunately, this scientist role is far less interesting than what Genosuke had to offer. Daiei regulars Shozo Nanbu and Saburo Date have smaller roles as a jewelry store associate and a chauffeur, respectively. Nanbu will next be seen in Warning from Space, and both actors would appear regularly in the Zatoichi film series in various roles. The most interesting character must be Dr. Kurokawa's actress sister, Ryuko Mizuki, played by Takiko Mizunoe. Mizunoe's distinctive look is defined by her short haircut, which was unusual for the time. Early in her career, she acted in an all-female musical revue, and short hair allowed her to play the male roles. Ryuko is first introduced when the other characters attend her revue, and a brief montage highlights Mizunoe's real-world talents, including singing, dancing, and even swordplay. Ryuko also happens to be indispensable to the plot. She rescues the Tears of Amour from the clutches of the Invisible Man. She is the one who tricks the true villain into revealing himself, and also the one to infiltrate the villain's hideout to rescue the kidnapped Dr. Nakazato. The Invisible Man is realized on screen through a variety of elaborate wirework and custom props, such as chairs with cushions that depress as if being sat on, pianos with keys that play by themselves, floating cigarettes puffing smoke, floating guns, self-driving motorcycles, and such like. While the floating guns do have that telltale wobble betraying the trick, other floating effects, such as a stool raised in anger and held ready to strike, are executed swiftly and forcefully and are quite shocking as a result. The film would not be an Invisible Man film, of course, without one of these scenes. The unwrapping scene is performed in almost the exact same manner as in the 1933 Universal film, but with more movement and intensity, which unfortunately ends up fouling the end result. The Invisible Man effect is accomplished by filming an actor in a black velvet bodysuit underneath their usual costume against a black background, which is then superimposed on a plate, so that anything black is rendered invisible. However, this means that when undressing, the actor must make certain his hands and head don't overlap with material that's meant to be visible. The seemingly innocuous act of undressing must be carefully choreographed with respect to the camera angle. In The Invisible Man Appears, the obvious matte lines and brief moments of disappearing cloth betray the technique behind the effect. That said, it's certainly a valiant effort. The music of The Invisible Man Appears was composed by Goro Nishi, a veteran composer who worked throughout the 30s, 40s, and 50s. He had previously scored the first trilogy of Musashi Miyamoto films directed by Hiroshi Inagaki in 1940 and 1942, starring Chiezo Kataoka as Musashi. However, those films are now lost, and Inagaki's second trilogy of films, directed in the 50s, starring Toshiro Mifune, have far surpassed the originals in popularity. Nishi's score is nearly a perfect match for the film. My only complaint is the cue for the Invisible Man is repeated way too often, to the point where it loses its effectiveness and even starts to grate on you. In the final analysis, I have to say, this was an overall enjoyable film with only a few complaints regarding editing and music. The effects serve the story nicely, and almost all the performances are terrific. The story itself is competently written and executed. Although certain reveals are predictable, the film wisely refrains from telegraphing them too strongly, so that there's always some element of uncertainty until the final scenes. I rate this film a solid 3 out of 4 stars. Since its release in 1949, The Invisible Man Appears has not been available in the North American market until 2021, when Arrow Video published it as a Blu-ray double feature, paired with Daiei's follow-up film, 1957's The Invisible Man vs. the Human Fly. The set features liner notes by Keith Allison, Haley Scanlon, and Tom Vincent, and a video interview with Kim Newman about the history of the Invisible Man in film.